Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Future-Proof Defense, Tech Watch in Action. We're so happy to have you join us today. As Annika said, I'm Emily, Senior Innovation Consultant at ITONICS, and I'll be your host for the session. For those joining us for the first time, ITONICS is an AI-powered innovation operating system that helps organizations systematically navigate change. And in today's session, we'll focus on how one organization working in the defense industry is doing just that, anticipating disruptive technologies, distinguishing signals from noise, and translating tech insights into actionable strategy. So our expert guest today is Timon Osinga, research consultant in strategic technology foresight at TNO, the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research. Drawing on his background in international relations and his service as a reservist with the Royal Netherlands Air and Space Force, Timon brings both strategic and operational perspectives to his role at TNO. In addition, he serves as an embedded scientist at the Air and Space Warfare Center of the Royal Netherlands Air and Space Force. And together, these experiences make him uniquely positioned to not only spot and make sense of complex technology developments, but to also translate these developments and their implications into clear, actionable insights for defense decision makers. Joining us as well is my colleague Nyan Chowdhury, Customer Success Manager here at ITONICS. Nyan brings a background in mechanical engineering and a proven track record in innovation management solutions, supporting organizations in building and scaling their foresight and innovation processes on our platform. So today we'll begin with a presentation from Timon and then move into a deep dive discussion with both Timon and Nyan, and finally open the floor to your questions. So before I hand over to Timon, let's get started with a quick poll. Please scan the QR code on the screen or access the URL that will be shared in the chat shortly, because we'd like to know, how would you describe the maturity of strategic foresight in your organization today? We like to start with this question because it often reveals a gap between where an organization is in their foresight journey and their intent or perceived value they see in foresight. And that's precisely why we're here today. And so with that, you can still access the poll in your own time, but I will stop sharing it for now. And with that, I'd like to hand over to our experts today. So Timon, could you start us off by maybe briefly introducing TNO and reflecting on how the landscape of defense has, or maybe more importantly, is changing the way TNO and your stakeholders, your partners, maybe your peers in the industry approach foresight and technology watch today?
Absolutely, Emily. Thank you so much for having me. Let me quickly share my screen because it also includes the presentation about TNO. So I believe you see the presentation now. Is that correct? Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll first start by, again, thanking you for having me. And it's always very great to get the opportunity to speak about the developments at the Ministry of Defense and the work that we do at TNO. What is TNO? TNO is a very large research organization, the largest in the Netherlands since 1932, conducting groundbreaking technological research for the Dutch society and the government, and in as broad as mobility, health, and sustainability. But myself, I'm in the DSS, the Department of Defense, Safety and Security within TNO. And we push boundaries worldwide about technological research for the Dutch Ministry of Defense, but also for other security organizations such as the police, the immigration office, etc. We do this via various expertise areas. These are divisions that we have. It's just a quick snapshot to give you an example of what the broad subjects that we work on. Everything going from acoustics and underwater warfare to autonomous systems and decision support. Myself, I'm in the division Human and Organizational Effectiveness, and specifically in the Department of Strategic Defense and Security Analysis. I don't think it will surprise any of you in this webinar today that technological innovations occur very rapidly in this current day and age. And while during the Cold War, these technological innovations and developments were mostly pushed and steered by the government and by the defense industry as well, nowadays, most of these developments are being pushed by the private industry. Which creates the fact that the Ministry of Defense doesn't really have a lot of say in which direction the technological developments go. Furthermore, the technological developments for the Ministry of Defense have very broad applications, and the dual-use nature of numerous technologies make it very difficult for the Ministry of Defense to get an accurate overview of what the most relevant technological developments are. For instance, these are just examples you see here on the slide. You can imagine that assessing the potential impact of hypersonic weapons is relatively easy for a military expert. But looking at and assessing at the potential impact of synthetic biology or nanomaterials of an autonomous system is much more difficult because it has inherent value both for the organization in itself in changing the way the Ministry of Defense is organized and the daily processes, but also on the military operation. And another example, when you look at autonomous systems, the Ministry of Defense encompasses not only the Army, but also the Air and Space Force, the Navy, and of course also the military police. If you look at autonomous weapons and autonomous systems, actually employing those in the various mission sets of those various operational commands puts very different demands on the autonomous systems. So you can't really take just one autonomous system and assess that at face value. So it's very difficult for the Ministry of Defense. Yeah, Emily.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but I think we can no longer see your presentation.
You can no longer see my presentation. That is strange. I am screen sharing. Nyan?
Yes, you are.
I am.
Yeah, I can see the presentation.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay.
No worries, no worries, no worries. I hope that everyone sees it. So good that you interrupted. Don't worry. So a lot of technological developments occur very, very rapidly, which creates inherent difficulties for the Ministry of Defense. Even though historically, technology has been one of the most disruptive factors in further developing the military domain and the act and conduct of war. And while I do not want to get into in detail discussion about the Clausewitzian discussion about the nature and the character of war, we do see that technologies in the past have had various impacts on various disruptive impact on the conduct of war. And we make a distinction between play changers and game changers, whereas in the technologies that are play changers, they are changing the way you play or you act in war. For instance, smart munitions, when you look at the Second World War, when they attempted to strike a target with aerial bombers, they were thinking and calculating how many sorties and how many planes you needed to destroy one target. Smart munitions enable it so that it's the other way around. You don't go you now go from planes, a number of planes for a certain target, to a number of targets per plane and per sortie. So it really changes the way your standard operating procedures and your standard tactics can be employed and need to be changed to complete certain missions. Game changers are more strategic. They have more influence and they're more disruptive. They actually change the game itself. A good example of that historically has been submarines, which actually changed naval warfare by literally adding another dimension to the battlefield, namely below the water level. Nuclear weapons is another great example. It really changed the geopolitical playing field when the United States created and then used atomic weapons. But then it also changed again when the USSR developed their atomic weapons, and then when other states also got the atomic weapons. So technology has in history been a disruptive trend and disruptive factor developing the military domain. However, of course, we cannot predict the future, which creates inherent difficulty for us to understand the potential disruptive effect of technology. When you look at the past, you can see several examples of technological developments that no one saw coming. And you see here the smartphone. Everyone here has one nowadays. The individual components, they were quite obvious, and the developments of those components were quite obvious for the industry. But the combination of all those components together and the impact that it had on society as a whole, and therefore also on the military, that wasn't really seen coming by many people. Some examples of military applications, they were seen in the past. For instance, you see the quadcopters and all the drones that you see in Ukraine in such a large scale. ISIS was already using those drones in 2014 with small grenades at the bottom of them. So we saw them coming, but we underestimated the impact. For other developments, we anticipated, as Western nations, we anticipated them on time because we're basically on the forefront of those innovations. Think of the tank in the First World War, but also the use of the aircraft carrier and the use of naval aviation in naval warfare. So even though we do not have all the answers, we at TNO try to help the Netherlands Ministry of Defense in keeping track of and assessing those technologies and the developments for the future. So that's our Defense Technology Watch project. We try to identify the technological developments and their potential applications in the military domain, both on the organization and on the military operations. But an overview is not enough. The Ministry of Defense also needs an assessment. They need to know what are the most important innovations and technology developments in the future, in the short term, in the long term, maybe as a possible threat, but also which opportunities have the most opportunity for the Ministry of Defense. By doing so, we help them in steering their investment decisions, strategic vision for the future, and monitoring all developments. To do this, we have an online platform, the ITONICS Future Innovations Radar, which we use internally at TNO and other research institutes to aid the Ministry of Defense. We use this platform, which is a web-based tool, to provide an overview of relevant future applications of technology, which is really focused on the capability level. We do this by asking technological experts within TNO, NLR, and MARIN. NLR is the Royal Netherlands Aerospace Research Institute, and MARIN is the Maritime Research Institute here in the Netherlands. And ask them to provide input by in the platform of new innovations, new applications of technology in the military domain in the future. So that really is the tech push side of the developments. And then Ministry of Defense personnel have the ability to assess those innovations, those technological developments on potential impact and potential feasibility. And I'll go into more detail in that later in the slides. By doing so, we provide a bridge between the technical and the MoD experts, which really is important because they speak a different language. What then does an innovation look like? They are cards, and I'm quickly going to go through this because here's just an example. You have the regular fields such as description, impact, and state of the art, and challenges. I quickly want to highlight the rating function here on the right, what I just discussed about the MoD personnel having been allowed to assess the innovations. We give them the opportunity to assess innovations on impact and feasibility, but we deliberately take separately the opportunity and the threat component and the opponents and itself component, because you can imagine that certain artificial intelligence, certain autonomous systems, due to our different norms and values that we have compared to our contemporary or our potential opponents, they maybe have a different place of the human in the loop or on the loop, which enables them to maybe more effectively use those innovations, those autonomous systems and weapons on the battlefield. So that's why we want to take those away, take those apart from each other. When we look further down, one thing I want to highlight, we have TRL, so that's technology readiness level. That's always a baseline for us. But we also wanted to add the expected time to TRL 9. We wanted to do this because for the Ministry of Defense, they don't really, a singular TRL 3 from a certain technological field is different from another, could be different from another technological field, because developments in that field, for instance, ICT and computer science, developments there go much quicker than in platform systems or in weapon systems. So the TRL 3 in one area is different than in the other area. It can take much less time to further develop that innovation. We also wanted to create a snowball effect. If you read or you look at a certain, as defense personnel, you look at a relevant innovation for you. If you scroll down, you see other attached relevant innovations. Furthermore, you see here at the bottom, or at the top, you see the tech areas with the 4 in brackets. Our base taxonomy is the fundamental defense areas that the MoD, in collaboration with us, have identified as being crucial to develop for the future. But we have also a different perspective being the tech areas. You can, for instance, imagine that innovations regarding artificial intelligence can have impact both on sensor systems, on platform systems, on weapon systems, etc. So we wanted to give personnel the opportunity to just look at all artificial intelligence innovations or all quantum innovations. So that's a different lens that you can view all the developments on the platform. This I quickly want to highlight because it's all a nice and fancy tool, but we also want an analysis. We want to provide the Ministry of Defense and ourselves at TNO with an analytical tool to aid them in their investments research. So by getting the defense personnel to assess the innovations on impact and feasibility, we get this matrix. And this is the standard view that we have with on the x-axis the impact threat and on the y-axis the feasibility opponents. And what this shows is that the top quadrant, top right quadrant, those are the innovations which have the most impact threat rating, so that they are the most impactful from a threat perspective. But also, it's very high. The chance is very high that our opponents will probably be able to field that innovation, which in effect means that the innovations at the top right corner, they will probably be encountered by the Ministry of Defense in future battles and battlefields, and they will have a very high threat environment. We can also add more filters. For instance, if they only want to look at the short-term or more on the long-term innovations, you can also add those filters to this matrix. What then do we use this platform for concretely? So we at TNO and our department, we advise them, the Ministry of Defense, and we conduct and we provide them policy advice on their strategic vision documents. We also use it for our own research that we conduct for them. So the MIVD, that's the Military Secret Service of the Netherlands, they came to us with a question: what are the most important developments, technological developments on the intelligence domain? Then we use this platform as one of the sources to aid them in that in answering that question. Another one is below that. That's the battlefield of the future. And the final slide goes a bit more deeply in our strategic foresight work at our department. We got a question: what might the world look like in 2040? And what might this mean for the Ministry of Defense? In that research, that project, we looked at the entire breadth of the world, the demographic trends, ecologic trends, economic trends, also technological. And we also use this platform and innovations in here to look at what the future world might look like and what that might mean for the Ministry of Defense. And finally, the Ministry of Defense uses it itself for their strategic documents and strategic guidance. For instance, in thinking about potential solutions for outstanding capability gaps that they have right now, but also the various warfare centra. So at the Aerospace Warfare Center, where I am embedded scientist, but also the Maritime Warfare Center, they use our platform for road mapping and for thinking about future solutions to our problems. And how then does this tie in into the broader strategic foresight work that we do? The technological side is only one aspect of the research that we conduct for the Ministry of Defense. Our department, we have developed the VISTA, the View on Strategic Anticipation methodology, which is an iterative process to conduct foresight research. And you see the building blocks here. And the Future Innovation Radar and the Tech Watch is only one aspect in the trend analysis. Other aspects in the trend analysis are a large trend analysis of basically the entire world based on the D-step domains. And then we also do driving our force identification. We go internally within our organizations to actually talk to experts on the all technological fields to see what they think the direction is of those technologies. And in the end, in a military future projection, through various steps, various quantitative and qualitative analysis, we give them a potential future projection or potential futures projection to guide them and aid them in their strategic vision documents. That concludes my presentation. And Emily, I think it's back to you. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
All right. Great. Thank you so much, Timon, for that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions I see coming in, and we're going to get to them. But in the meantime, maybe we will answer some of them in a discussion that we can have between yourself and Nyan. And I'd like to get started by going a bit deeper on the topic of how to turn these technology insights into action. So you've touched on this a little bit, but I think in foresight, this is often one of the most challenging aspects that we see in our experience, that you can, derive these really exciting, really, evidence-based insights on emerging technologies. You can disseminate them widely amongst your stakeholders. But then often they sit in reports or in nice slide decks. So my question to you is, when you identify say, a high impact technology on the matrix, the high impact threat and a high feasibility component for opponents. How do you turn that into an actionable decision? And again, you've touched on this a little bit, but if you can go a bit deeper onto how to turn that into a decision, and then what kinds of decisions does it typically inform?
Absolutely, that's a very good question, and it's also something, honestly, that we struggle with every day in conducting strategic foresight. I think everyone in the field can recognize that, and I think there's a distinction between passive and active ways in doing this. And let me start by the passive one, and that is that relevant MoD personnel, they can subscribe to innovations on the platform that are relevant for their organization, which can be on a strategic level. So that is the strategic innovation, the science and technology division within the Ministry of Defense, the short cyclic innovation division at the Ministry of Defense. They have more of a broader perspective, and they subscribe to innovations. And when they see an assessment which gets high in the matrix, gets scored very highly, then they get a notification of that. But that's also more on the tactical operational level in the various warfare centra. They also get a notification because they are subscribed to that innovation, which is relevant for the particular mission set, for instance, integrated air missile defense or something in the maritime domain. However, actively, there really is a responsibility for us as foresight practitioners. And what this means is basically that we are continuously conducting roadshows, talking to everyone within the Ministry of Defense, conducting analysis, indeed providing not only reports, but also nudging them periodically, almost every month or every week, with new developments, with new insights, to ensure that they are up to speed and that they know that there are certain innovations that had an update or that have been assessed as having a high impact. The decisions that then informs can be very varied, depending on the organization. If you're thinking about the warfare centra, they can what that can lead to is that they can start a project to actually develop that innovation, or they can look further deeper into the innovation and what this might entail for that particular use case. And more informally, they can also get in touch. That's a bridge function that the platform has between the MoD and the technical experts. If they just find something interesting, the first thing they mostly do is they get in touch. They send an email to that expert and say, "Hey, we're interested in this innovation. Could you please tell us more? Could we maybe have a meeting?" For the strategic departments, what this could mean is that they actually steer or they make adjustments to strategic policy, to maybe investment decisions together with the Ministry of Economic Affairs. But these are things and these are processes that also occur very far away from us. So sometimes very abstract, very unfamiliar to us what actually concretely happens when something is actually taken upon them by the Ministry of Defense.
Thank you for that. And I think that's you touched on a lot of other points that I would have asked questions around about, like what are some tips and tricks about how to communicate to decision makers and leadership. And it really feels that, I mean, there's these little steps. I mean, so much of it is around creating awareness, just simple acts like we've found in our experience, like creating newsletters to share around and stuff. So visibility is a big thing, but you've also designed your system in a way that's really connected to action in addition to putting it in front of the right people and backing it all up by evidence. So can you talk maybe in a bit more detail in your system, when an innovation is rated as procure, which is really like a sort of proposed action, very linked to action, what factors most influence that evaluation, and who sort of amongst that Ministry of Defense, the experts, maybe you can speak a bit more about the people doing that evaluation, and how you're collecting that.
Absolutely. And again, here, not a short, easy answer, unfortunately. So this also goes in two ways. We give MoD personnel, every day, 24/7, they have the ability to rate innovations that have been published. But given their very full agendas and that they have a lot of priorities, we also organize a yearly large assessment workshop based on all innovations that need assessing, which in some cases last year, there was about 300 innovations. And then what we try to do together with our stakeholder, our primary stakeholder at Science and Technology, we get as many SMEs, so subject matter experts within the Ministry of Defense, to us, or go to them, and we let them rate the innovations, and we get them into a discussion with our technical experts and what this might mean. What this also sometimes entails is that they acknowledge that this isn't something that should be developed. Maybe it's already quite mature. Maybe they realize sometimes that this is something that they really need to buy now, because our procurement division within the Ministry of Defense is still somewhat slow sometimes. So in some cases, it really can quite be a pragmatic decision to try to procure the innovation right now. And from the Ministry of Defense perspective, one of the, I think, the most important deliberations behind assessing such an innovation as a procure, as an innovation to procure, is not particularly the maturity of that innovation, because in most cases, the maturity can be helped if enough effort and time and money is put into the innovation. But it's mostly if it's seen as a really important solution to a big capability gap that they see right now. And that can be as small as a certain ballistic missile defense sensor that they're lacking, or as broad as we still have to connect all of our IT systems in a certain department. It can be very broad, and it can be very narrow. So the reasons vary. And the thing is, that's why it's also difficult for us to get a pinpoint on, because the nature of most of these innovations are dual use. They don't really have application just only for one aspect in the military domain. They're also for the civil domain, and they're very broadly relevant for the Ministry of Defense.
Thanks.
I hope that somewhat answers your question.
For me, that's great. And I'd really like to get back to the topic of dual use, because I think that's a really important topic on, at the forefront right at the moment. But before that, maybe a question for Nyan, as we're talking about evaluations and collaborative evaluation. And Nyan, I know you have a lot of experience in this, and you've seen this firsthand with a lot of the customers that you work with. So how do you see collaborative evaluation features changing the quality and speed of the insights or the decisions that come out of it?
Yeah, hi everyone, first of all. And that's basically a great question. Yeah, but looking into working with a lot of clients also in defense, working with Timon over the years. But then looking into that perspective, collaborative evaluation features does really change the game. And exactly what you mentioned, that is first the quality of insights and also the speed at which you get them, right? So first, on the quality side, collaboration helps close the blind spot of, first of all, the single person perspective. No single expert usually has the full picture of every technology. One person might look at technical feasibility, other maybe at an operational fit of it, and others maybe at a strategic value. When you bring all of these perspectives together in a structured way, the end result is much more balanced and reliable. Plus, when people capture not just the score, but the reason why behind it, you actually create a record that strengthens decision-making in a long term and avoids the trap of single person bias, right? Second, on the speed side, it's about moving away from the old way and methods of doing this. Earlier, it's always like sending endless emails or scattered spreadsheets, and you usually get way much time and effort on that. With the collaborative workflows with ITONICS, I think Timon already mentioned it. So with the tool, we have the ratings in there. So what we like to do is evaluations usually happen in parallel. So whenever any technology is ready for the experts, they are being sent and they can evaluate quite way fast. And the system also allows you to have a right tracking in place, real-time dashboards, so that things are moving and aggregated, right? So in the end, in practice, what you actually see in organizations moving from fragmented and slow evaluation cycles to a process that is fast, transparent, and backed by evidence. And in defense, where timing and credibility are very critical, that shift makes a real difference.
Great, thanks, Nan. And I think that's another way in which organizations can keep their technology portfolio, or in this case, like a radar and a matrix, from becoming static. It's something that you can continuously keep up to date and keep that unbiased perspective. But with that, sort of seeing things, technologies plotted on a radar or matrix or in your portfolio, to see them move positions or to stay dynamic and living. Maybe a question to Timon again about how often do you see this? So how often do you see tech innovations shift from their plotted position, either because of because of the evaluation from experts or because of the shifts you are seeing in the landscape?
Yeah, we see this quite often, although not as drastically as you might imagine. I think most of us will probably here be familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, and that's also relevant for military applications. You see, of course, everywhere in the media the hype about autonomous systems, about drones. AI is a buzzword, and buzzword bingo is something that we also encounter in the defense domain as well. But the actual operational experts within the Defense Department that rate the innovations, they're remarkably realistic and pragmatic. They tend to be more pessimistic about the potential applications of that technology, and more realistic about the actual use and the challenges that still have to be overcome than I think most technological purists would tend it to be. So we do see shifts, and we do see them reflected based on, for instance, what you see currently in conflicts in the world. But in my experience, also speaking with those technical experts, technically most of the things that they envision are possible. I think the most important thing keeping these developments back is actually the adaptation of the technology by the military. And that is why, and this is a bit of a sidestep, but we're thinking within our department not about talking about about technology anymore, or not purely talking about technology anymore, and in terms of TRL level, so technology readiness level, but more on capability readiness level. So actually assessing not only the maturity of that technology, but also about the potential of the organization actually fielding that capability. And so that is something that we also discuss with the Ministry of Defense, which somewhat, I think, will enable these shifts to be even less so and even more realistic than they currently are.
Great. And I do want to allow enough time for our audience Q&A. So I think I'll wrap up with one more question. As I said, getting back to the dual use topic, because you're talking about, assessing technologies also on the actual use or the application. And I think that becomes maybe not challenging, but more complex with dual use technologies, and how traditionally we saw technologies often move from defense into the civilian space. And now we're seeing a lot of flow, well, in both directions, as you mentioned with drones. I mean, you see this commercial drones moving into the defense space. And so, yeah, maybe you could speak a few words about how has this sort of rise of dual use technologies changed your radar, if at all, or changed your process of technology watch? How do you spot those dual use technologies that are sitting in the civilian space? And maybe examples you could share.
Absolutely. And I think the lucky thing for us as TNO is that we have so much expertise on so much varying fields. So actually from the start of using this platform, we had envisioned them incorporating dual use technologies in the platform, because we recognized back then, I wasn't working at TNO back then, but my colleagues recognized that it's not only weapon systems, it's not only platform systems and new materials that are relevant for the Ministry of Defense. It's also things like cryptography, networks, computer engineering, but also new forms of energy. So from the start of the platform, we actually incorporated those departments in the platform as well, that they put their innovations, which are a bit more on the civilian side, on the civil side, on the private sector, but we got them to discuss with defense personnel and try to actually come together to see what the potential impact for the military domain that might have. So we, as Foresight researchers at our department, we have, I think, a half-yearly discussion with these defense, safety, and security departments to see what developments they see in their field and see what that might mean for us at the Ministry, or for us and them at the Ministry of Defense. So for us as TechWatch and as Trend and Foresight researchers, we have been very much in acknowledgement of the fact that the dual use nature of most technologies relevant for the future has very high impact, as well as the fact that technologies, they don't develop in a vacuum. So it's not only the dual use character of technologies that have impact on the Ministry of Defense, it's also everything, the context around the development and the use of technology. You think of social and demographic trends. So we also always try to assess technological developments from a holistic point of view. That's why I think one of the dual use technologies, it is very difficult, but our methodologies, they're really incorporating the dual use technologies. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think also that exercise of like, using foresight to look at like, what does the world look like in 2040, not just from our defense industry and technology, but looking at the broader landscape of also trends across all steep categories. That also helps, to sort of, anticipate some of those changes and new technologies and applications. But yes, as promised, I'd like to sort of hand it over to our audience as well. We've got a few questions coming in. So yeah, if you haven't already done so, please pop a question in the Q&A. And with the time remaining, if we don't get through everything, we will be sure to collect all these questions and we will share them with Timon and Nyan, of course, and then we can follow up in our sort of follow-up email to everyone afterwards. But yeah, let's get in. This is from Anonymous, and I think directed to you, Timon. Do you see the Netherlands Ministry of Defense at the forefront of technology foresight in Europe? And is there any exchange or coordination with other European organizations or ministries of defense?
Good question. And again, going back to my statement earlier about not working and not things are developing in a vacuum, we recognize that, of course, we as the Netherlands are a very small country. We have a very large industrial and technological base on certain fields, but we know that we can't do it all by ourselves. So regarding technology foresight and broader strategic foresight, we work very heavily with the Brits. So that's DSTL, the Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, but also with the Norwegians and the Swedes, the FFI and the FOI, in not only so in the content itself, so talking about what they see, what trends they see, and what that might mean for them, but also thinking about new methodologies and new ways in conducting this research, and thinking about lessons learned. And we also, with the Swedes, for instance, we're probably going to do a technology assessment in the next year. We're going to do one ourselves, and they're going to do one, and then compare our results and see where we differ and see what we might learn from that. And so, to answer your first question, if the Netherlands is at the forefront of strategic foresight, it's difficult to say. I think for the in certain technological areas, in the use of AI and use of certain platforms, we are at the forefront, but we are still a very small country, and we have as TNO, although we're quite a large organization, when compared to organizations such as Fraunhofer or DSTL, they are much larger, and size has its drawbacks and its benefits. So we are sometimes more innovative, but when these large organizations, they have an idea and they have a methodology fully worked out, they can put a lot of resources into that. So for instance, the DCDC, the Global Strategic Trends Report from the British government, that is really a benchmark document that we use. And unfortunately, we really don't actually have the manpower and the resources to produce such a product ourselves, but we use this product and enhance it for our own stakeholders and for our own perspective. So we use each other also in our various expertise and strengths.
Great. I think that actually touched on a few other questions. So I'm also, for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap up with one question that covers quite a bit. So yeah, and maybe Nyan, you can also weigh in on this one. So Anonymous asks, it seems that this is a process for curating information, strategic foresight. Its success or failure is dependent on leveraging a large network of contributions, as you've just sort of pointed out, but which works if you have an organization the size of the Ministry of Defense. But for smaller organizations trying to navigate uncertainty, would either of you have some recommendations for, first of all, how to select and engage stakeholders, how to design the tool to inspire maximum engagement, so stakeholders, engagement, and pulling in external data to build insights with less human resource demand? Sorry, it's a big one.
It is a big one, and it's a difficult question. I think for smaller organizations, we have the luxury at TNO that we are quite large and that we have the entire breadth of the research technology areas of expertise within the organization. I think for a smaller organization, and Nyan, you please fill me in or correct me if you have a different opinion, of course. It's always interesting to have a discussion about that. But when you're a smaller organization, I think it's better to specialize, to put more resources into getting in-depth detail and knowledge about a certain or a couple of subjects, instead of trying to just dip your toes in the entire breadth of all fields, because that is really, I think it's impossible to get the depth that stakeholders will require. And as for the stakeholders, there again, I would call on the snowball effect. So you should try to get in touch with and it really depends on what kind of organization you are, of course. But if you find the right people, they can connect you with other more important people or even more relevant people for your organization who are internal stakeholders within that industry. Maybe to reach those organizations, go to network events, certain large conferences. There are various ways to do that. But I think that those are the tips that I would give on first hand. But maybe Nyan has something else to add.
Oh, I think you had it very rightly put in there. But well, if I had to give one piece of advice for getting started here with strategic foresight, even in organizations, even in smaller ones, I would be starting with a golden rule to start simple and structured. Yeah, so in this field, even as complex as defense or even in small organizations, you don't need to capture everything at once. And that's what you also quite expressed, Timon, in there. Like when you start having too many things at once, you basically can go endless without achieving anything. So how would you start? Define a few clear priority areas. Agree on a common language for how you evaluate your signals or technologies with stakeholders, and get the right people into the habit of contributing. Yeah, once that rhythm is in place, you can scale it up. And that's where also tools like ITONICS can really help you to connect signals, trends, technologies, and all the data points that you really need to build up your strategic foresight capability into a living system that even leadership can actually use for decision making. And that's the important thing, is not to aim for perfection on day one, but actually to build a momentum and grow from there, right?
Great. Thank you both. That's very practical advice. And if I might just add one additional thing on the last point about how to build, this body of insights with less human resource demand, and both of you have touched on that. Nyan also, talking about how to do it, more systematically in a platform like ITONICS. And also what we've seen recently in strategic foresight is the complementing power of AI. Of course, human experts, there's no replacement for this, but being able to use an AI tool to connect those insights, to spot duplication and overlap and synergies, I think this helps move things forward a lot more seamlessly, more streamlined and quicker with, again, if you're a small organization with less human resource demand. But yeah, that is all we have time for today in terms of questions. But as we said, we will collect all of those and get back to you guys in our follow-up email. Quickly before we close, I just have one more question I would like to ask you guys. And that is, because I think this would be fun to share in following up. Which emerging technology do you think will make the most impact defense in the next 5 years? So you guys can type your answers in there, and this will show up as a word cloud that we can share with everyone following up. But for now, we will close off this webinar, and we'll share the results of this along with all supporting materials from today's session. And I just want to say a final big thanks again to our guest, Timon Osinga, and my colleague, Nyan Chowdhury. And thanks to you for being such a great audience today, and see you next time.